My name is Elena. I am 42 years old, and I was born in a small city in Romania called Sibiu, where the houses have eyes. That is what people say about the oval attic windows that look out over the cobblestone streets like faces watching everything. I grew up under those watching windows, the daughter of a doctor and a music teacher, in a city that was beautiful in a way that made you feel the beauty was asking something of you, requiring you to live up to it somehow. I left when I was 24. I have spent the 18 years since trying to decide whether leaving was the bravest thing I ever did, or the thing I will spend the rest of my life quietly regretting. But that is not the story I want to tell you today. The story I want to tell you is about a letter I found in my mother's house 2 years ago, 3 weeks after she died, inside a wooden box I had never seen before, wrapped in a cloth and placed at the very back of her closet behind winter coats that still smelled like her. A letter that told me something about my own life that I had been living inside for 40 years without knowing. Let me go back to the beginning, because the beginning matters. I left Romania in 2006, the year the country joined the European Union, and suddenly the walls that had existed for so long became doors. I had a degree in architecture, a small amount of savings, and an offer to work at a firm in Amsterdam that I had found through a professor at my university who had connections there. My parents drove me to the airport in Bucharest. My father shook my hand at the gate, and my mother held me for a very long time without speaking, and when she finally let go, she pressed her palm against my face and looked at me in a way I have never been able to fully describe. Not sad exactly. Not proud exactly. Something older than either of those. Something that had weight to it I did not understand at the time. Amsterdam was cold and gray and bewilderingly flat after the hills of Sibiu, and I loved it almost immediately with the irrational affection you have for a place that challenges you in ways your home never did. The firm where I worked was small but serious. 3 partners and 9 architects designing mostly residential projects with a particular commitment to sustainable materials that I found genuinely interesting. I worked long hours and made slow friends and learned Dutch with the stubbornness of someone who understands that language is the difference between existing in a place and actually living there. 3 years after arriving, I met Thomas. He was Dutch, 41 to my 27, a structural engineer who worked with our firm on several projects. He was not immediately striking, medium height, sandy hair going slightly gray at the temples, the kind of quiet that you initially read as reserve and later understand is actually a very settled relationship with his own inner life. He asked questions that showed he had been listening. He remembered what you told him. He had opinions about things and expressed them without aggression. After several relationships in my 20s with men who were either brilliant and chaotic or stable and dull, Thomas felt like a different category entirely. We got together after a year of working alongside each other and several months of something that could only be described as a very slow mutual acknowledgement that we wanted more than professional proximity. He was methodical even in courtship, which I found both slightly amusing and deeply reassuring. He did not rush anything. He did not perform certainty he didn't feel. He said, one evening over dinner at a small Indonesian restaurant near the Vondelpark, "I think I would like to try this properly, if you're open to it." I said I was. That was the beginning. We married when I was 30 in a small ceremony in Amsterdam, with his family and my parents who flew over from Sibiu and who behaved with the particular combination of warmth and formality that Romanian parents of a certain generation bring to meeting Dutch in-laws, which meant a great deal of very sincere toasting and some communication difficulties that everyone navigated with goodwill. My mother danced at the reception, which surprised me because she had never been a dancer, and when I asked her about it later, she said, "Sometimes you feel something, and dancing is the only honest response." I thought about that for years afterward. Thomas and I built a life in Amsterdam that was, by any external measure, A very good one. We bought an apartment near the Jordan, the kind with tall ceilings and large windows that let the flat Dutch light in at an angle that made everything look slightly more significant than it was. We traveled when we could. Romania every Christmas, Portugal in summer, a trip to Japan that we had planned for 3 years, and that exceeded what we had planned for. We talked about children and decided we wanted them, and then fell into the way of couples who want children and are not yet trying but are no longer actively not trying, which is its own kind of limbo that can last longer than you intend. My mother visited every spring, always alone. My father's health made travel harder as the years went on, and those visits were the weeks of the year I looked forward to most. She would arrive with things from Sibiu, jars of my grandmother's preserved vegetables, a particular brand of chocolate I had loved as a child, sometimes something from the market, a small woven thing or a carved wooden item that she thought I would like. We walked the canals. We cooked together in the small kitchen. She asked about work, about Thomas, about whether I was happy, and I told her yes, which was true. I was happy. The kind of happiness that is not dramatic or overwhelming, but is steady and real, the kind you build rather than find. She died in January 2 years ago. Not suddenly. She had been ill for 8 months, a cancer that moved with the particular cruelty of cancers that give you enough time to prepare and not enough time to say everything you needed to say. I flew to Sibiu when she went into the final decline, and I was there at the end, holding her hand in the room where she had slept for 40 years, with the watching windows of the neighborhood outside and the cold Romanian January pressing against the glass. She held my hand very tightly at the end, and she said something I almost didn't hear, and what she said was, "The box! Find the box! I should have told you earlier. I'm sorry." And then she was gone. I did not find the box that night or the next day. I was managing the funeral, the relatives, the practical machinery of death that takes over and fills every hour with tasks. My father was frail and bewildered with grief and needed looking after. Thomas had flown in and was beside me through all of it, steadily and without complaint, doing what needed to be done. I did not go looking for the box until 3 weeks after the funeral, when the relatives had gone home, and my father was settled and Thomas had had to go back to Amsterdam for work, and I was alone in my parents' house for the first time in my life. I found it at the back of her closet, exactly where she had kept it. Wooden, small, with a simple latch. Inside, wrapped in a piece of green cotton fabric, was a letter, handwritten, in Romanian, 6 pages, dated March 1983, 2 years before I was born. It was written to my mother from a woman named Christina. I did not recognize the name. The letter was long and difficult in places, the handwriting hurried in some sections and very deliberate in others, as if the writer had started in a rush and then made herself slow down for the parts that mattered most. I read it through once quickly, standing in the closet doorway with my coat still on, and then I went and sat down at the kitchen table and read it again, slowly, from the beginning. Christina was my mother's younger sister. I did not know my mother had a younger sister. I had grown up believing my mother was an only child. She had told me this more than once, and my father had confirmed it, and I had never had any reason to doubt it. My grandparents, both dead by the time I was a teenager, had never mentioned another daughter. There had been no photographs, no stories, no trace. The letter explained everything and nothing at the same time, the way that revelations from the past always do. Christina had been 20 years old in 1983, living in Bucharest, when she became pregnant by a man who could not or would not marry her. The letter was not entirely clear on the reasons, only that they were reasons Christina believed were insurmountable. Romania in 1983 was Ceausescu's Romania, a place where abortion was illegal, where single motherhood was stigmatized beyond what Christina felt she could survive, where the options available to a 20-year-old woman in her situation were very few and very bad. She had written to my mother in desperation. She had asked my mother, who was married by then and settled, whether she and my father would raise the child. My mother had said yes.